Eric's been saying I'm dense lately, that I don't get what people are saying. So he brought home the up-and-coming violinist he's been promoting. He had the kid play for me right in our living room. The boy was young and frankly not that skilled. The notes that came out of his violin were sharp and grating. But Eric listened, mesmerized, then turned to me. "Henry, isn't it beautiful?" I didn't say anything. I just pressed my hands hard against my ears. Eric frowned, annoyed. "Who are you putting on that face for? Ben plays just as well as you did back in the day." But he didn't know. I was already going deaf. The day I was diagnosed, it was pouring rain in San Francisco. I stood outside the hospital, unable to get a cab, and called Eric 3 times. The first call was rejected. The second rang for a long time before going to voicemail. The third one finally connected, but all I heard was a wall of static, laughter, and loud music. Then, a young man's voice came on the line. "Hello? Who is this?" Eric's in the middle of a drinking game, he can't talk. My fingers, gripping the phone, turned white. Rainwater trickled down the umbrella's spine and into my sleeve. A bone-deep chill. "This is Henry." "Oh, the wifey." His tone was flippant, with no respect at all. "Eric said he's not coming home tonight. Told you to go to sleep and not to bother checking up on him." The line went dead. In that moment, the sound of the rain suddenly felt distant and muffled. It was like listening through a thick pane of glass, or like I was sinking into the deep sea. The only thing left was the ringing in my head, growing louder and louder. I looked down at the diagnosis report, soaked by the rain. Metastatic brain cancer. The ink had bled, blurring the words. Half an hour earlier, the old doctor's mouth had moved. I'd strained to read his lips to understand what he was saying. "While you can still hear a little, you should go listen to the sounds you want to hear." What did I want to hear? Did I want to hear Eric say he loved me? I didn't think so. Not anymore. I crumpled the report into a ball and threw it into a nearby trash can. That day, I walked home in the rain. I was soaked to the bone by the time I arrived. I didn't turn on the lights, just fumbled to take off my shoes in the dark. On the living room coffee table, Eric's tie was still there from where he'd tossed it yesterday, along with a half-empty bottle of red wine. Next to it was a black violin case with a gold-stamped logo. It was Ben's. As I passed the console table in the entryway, I glanced instinctively at the crystal tray. That's where our matching wedding rings used to be. Eric had bought them on a whim 3 years ago. After buying them, he'd just left them there to collect dust. He said we'd go get our marriage license as soon as he wasn't so busy. That busy spell lasted 3 years. Now the tray was empty. All that was left was a thin layer of dust. And in the middle of the dust, 2 clean circles. Oh, I remembered now. Last week, Eric took the rings, saying they needed to be resized. Later, I saw one of them on Ben's social feed. It was on the hand he used to play the violin with the caption, "Thanks for spoiling me, Mr. E." That was fine. I found them disgusting anyway. At least Eric didn't bring it back to shove in my face. I made myself a bowl of noodles. The water boiled for a long time before I noticed. I only snapped out of it when the water boiled over, extinguishing the flame with a hiss. The smell of something burning filled my nose. The noodles were mushy, and I forgot to add salt. It was like chewing wax. After I finished, I washed the bowl and wiped the kitchen until it was spotless. Then I started packing. I had lived in this villa for 7 years, but I owned shockingly little. The closet was mostly filled with Eric's custom-tailored suits. My clothes were crammed into a corner, just a few plain sweaters and pairs of jeans. In another corner stood a dusty cello. I brought it with me 7 years ago, back when I was the first chair at the conservatory. Eric used to say he loved watching me play. Later, he said he preferred me to be more docile, so I stopped playing. The cello strings had long since snapped. I ran a hand over its body, my fingertips coming away coated in dust. I wasn't taking it with me. I only packed a few changes of clothes, a yellowed photo album, and our only family picture. Everything fit into a small 20-inch carry-on. That was my 7 years. I left in the middle of the night. The rain had let up a bit, but the wind was strong, whipping the trees along the road back and forth. The streets were empty. The dim yellow streetlights stretched my shadow long before the rain shattered it on the pavement. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, the screen's bright light hurting my eyes. It was a text from Eric. Did you make that hangover soup? I'll be home in half an hour. His tone was so entitled. For 7 years, I had been his maid, his shadow always available, never complaining. I stood under the streetlight, my fingers stiff with cold. I typed back, "No, let's break up." After sending it, I blocked his number and deleted the contact. It was all done in one smooth motion, without a shred of hesitation. After all that, I didn't feel the heart-wrenching pain I'd expected. All I felt was a sense of peace, like a weight had finally been lifted. I guess it's because a heart doesn't die in an instant. It erodes slowly, over 7 years of lonely nights, of unanswered calls, of being told, "Don't be so dramatic." I needed to find a place to stay, but in a city as big as San Francisco, I had no idea where to go. Just then, a motorcycle sped past, kicking up a sheet of water. I couldn't dodge in time and got splashed with muddy water. The bike screeched to a halt up ahead, then turned around and came back. The rider took off his helmet, revealing a young, rugged face. He had a faint scar on his brow bone and sharp eyes. He looked at me and froze for a second. "Henry?" I watched his lips move, taking a moment to realize he was calling my name. Cole, the mechanic from the old neighborhood who always smelled of motor oil. My high school neighbor. But I couldn't hear what he was saying. I could only see his mouth moving quickly, his brow furrowed, as rain slid down his cheeks. I pointed to my ears and shook my head. "Cole, speak up. I can't hear you very well." Cole froze. He stared at me, his gaze moving from my pale face to the lonely suitcase in my hand, and finally to my rain-soaked pant legs. He was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly got off the bike, snatched my suitcase, and strapped it to the back seat. Then he put his helmet, still warm from his body, on my head. He made a gesture in front of me. "Get on." I didn't know where we were going, but I got on anyway. The motorcycle started, the engine's roar vibrating through my entire body from my spine. It was the only vibration I could feel clearly at that moment, real and scorching hot. I reached out my hands, hesitated for a moment, and then gently grabbed the hem of his riding jacket. The back in front of me stiffened, and then the bike slowed, the ride becoming steady. Cole took me back to his auto shop. The first floor was the garage, filled with all kinds of parts and discarded tires. The second floor was his living space. It was simple, but it was warm. He found me one of his riding jackets to wear. It was black and huge, and I had to roll up the sleeves several times. I smelled that familiar scent of motor oil again. Mixed with a faint hint of tobacco, it somehow made me feel safe. Cole poured me a cup of hot water and sat across from me, pulling out a small whiteboard and a marker. He wrote on it, "What happened? Did Eric mess with you?" He held the board up for me to see, his eyes smoldering with anger. I held the warm cup and smiled faintly. "No, we broke up." Cole stared at me for a moment, then wrote again. "What's wrong with your ears?" I looked down at the steam rising from my cup, blurring my vision.
"I'm sick.
I'm going deaf." This time, Cole didn't write anything for a long while. I looked up and saw him biting his lower lip so hard his eyes were turning red. "Don't cry," I said, waving a hand in front of his face. "It doesn't even hurt. It just couldn't be cured. And it would kill me." But Cole suddenly grabbed my hand. His palms were rough, calloused, with grease still staining the lines of his nails. But his hand was scorching hot. Cole didn't write or speak. He just bowed his head and buried his face in my palm. His shoulders were shaking violently. I felt something wet. Hot liquid trickled through my fingers, so hot it made my heart tremble. I suddenly remembered. This was just like him in high school. Whenever he got into a fight and was hurt, he was too scared to go home, so he'd hide in my stairwell and wait for me to patch him up. He was the same way back then. No matter how much it hurt, he wouldn't cry out. He'd just grip my hand and endure it. After I got with Eric and moved to the villa, I rarely saw him. I never thought that in the end, the one to take me in would be this forgotten stray I'd left behind. I sighed and gently patted his bristly hair with my other hand. "Cole, I have nowhere else to go." Cole looked up, his eyes as red as a rabbit's. He grabbed the whiteboard and fiercely scrawled a few huge words. "I'll take care of you." I ended up staying at the auto shop. Cole gave me the only bed on the second floor and set up a cot for himself in the garage downstairs. Cole wouldn't let me do any work, but I couldn't sit still. During the day, while he fixed cars, I'd sit on a small stool next to him. I'd hand him wrenches or help him at the front desk, ringing up customers. My hearing deteriorated quickly, like an unstoppable landslide. The first day, I could barely make out what Cole was saying if he shouted. By the third day, his voice became a muffled blur. By the seventh day, the world fell completely silent. That morning, I woke up and instinctively tried to listen for the birds outside the window, or for the sound of Cole's engine tests downstairs. But there was nothing. Nothing at all. I opened my mouth and tried to make a sound. But I couldn't hear myself. The terror of feeling my throat vibrate without any auditory feedback washed over me like a tidal wave. I ran downstairs barefoot. Cole was working on a red sports car, its hood propped open. He had his back to me, wearing a grease-stained gray tank top. His arm muscles were tense as he used a wrench to tighten something. I screamed his name, Cole, but he didn't turn around. He just kept working. Did I not make a sound? Was my voice too quiet? Panic clouded my thoughts. I rushed over and hugged him tightly from behind. I pressed my face against his back, trembling all over. Cole's body went rigid. The wrench in his hand fell to the ground with a clang. He spun around, and when he saw my tear-streaked face and terrified eyes, he panicked. He wanted to wipe my tears, but was afraid of getting my face dirty with his greasy hands. His hands hovered in midair, and the veins in his neck bulged with anxiety. His mouth opened and closed, as if he were frantically asking me what was wrong, while gesturing wildly at the vibrating engine of the sports car. I just kept shaking my head, pointing at my ears. I can't hear. Cole, I really can't hear anymore. Cole understood. He didn't say anything else, nor did he make any more gestures. He just held me tight, so tight, it felt like he was trying to merge me into his very bones. Then he took my hand and pressed it against his chest. Thump, thump. The strong, steady heartbeat pulsed through my palm, beat after beat. It was the sound of life. He was telling me, don't be afraid. I'm here. I leaned against him, feeling that one single frequency, and slowly, I stopped shaking. Eric found me half a month later. Cole was out that day, and I was in the shop doing the books. A black Maybach pulled up out front. The door opened, and Eric got out. He was thinner, with a shadow of stubble on his chin and dark circles under his eyes. He radiated a tired, frustrated energy. When he saw me sitting among a pile of old tires, wearing one of Cole's old t-shirts, his brow furrowed deeply. Eric strode over, grabbed my wrist, and tried to pull me outside. I didn't move, so he started yelling. But I couldn't hear him. I just watched him quietly. Watching him in his rage, he looked like a pathetic clown. It almost made me laugh. How could I have ever found this man charming? How could I have spent 7 years being so meek and submissive for someone like him? Seeing no reaction, no expression from me, Eric got even angrier. He let go of my wrist and started shouting, pointing his finger at my nose. He was probably calling me ungrateful, calling me cheap for choosing to be with a mechanic instead of going back to him. After he was done yelling, he seemed to calm down a bit. He took a deep breath and changed his expression. His eyes softened, and there was even a hint of pleading in them. Eric's lips moved. I made out the words, "Henry, come home with me." He said more, "Ben is gone. I bought the ring. Let's get married." As he spoke, he pulled a velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a diamond ring, big and flashy. Unfortunately, it wasn't from the matching set we were supposed to get. Married with. This was the new model from Cartier, the one Ben had shown off on his social feed. It was the one he had bought for Ben. I might be deaf, but I'm not blind. I looked at the ring and just felt sick. I picked up the calculator from the counter and typed in a series of numbers. 8888. Then I shoved the screen in his face. I pointed at the Maybach parked outside, then at the QR code for payment. I couldn't hear, but I could still talk, even if my voice sounded a bit strange. Need a repair? Pay up first. Eric was stunned. He stared at me in disbelief, as if he were seeing me for the first time. Just then, a hand smudged with motor oil reached over from behind me and pulled me back. Cole was back. He was holding a bag of fresh soup dumplings in one hand and a giant wrench in the other. He stood in front of me, looking down at Eric. His eyes were cold and dismissive, full of contempt. like he was looking at a piece of scrap metal. Intimidated, Eric took a step back and pointed at Cole, about to say something. Cole didn't give him the chance. He slammed the heavy wrench down on the metal workbench. A loud bang echoed through the shop. The table shook, and the screws on it jumped. Eric flinched, his face turning pale. Cole pointed at the door and spat out a single cold word. Out. Even though I couldn't hear it, I read his lips. So cool. Eric didn't get out, but he couldn't get back in the shop either. Cole blocked him outside the roll-up door. That afternoon I sat behind the counter. Even though I couldn't hear, I could feel the ground vibrating from time to time. That was them arguing outside, maybe even fighting. A long time later, Cole came back in. His tank top was torn at the corner, and he had a fresh bruise on his mouth that was bleeding slightly. But his face was expressionless. He just tossed the big wrench back into the toolbox, then came over and gently brushed my cheek with the back of his hand. He wrote on the notepad I was holding, "He's gone." My hands hurt. "Can we have noodles for dinner?" I looked at the cut on his lip and reached out to touch it, my fingertip coming away with a speck of blood. "Does it hurt?" I asked. Cole shook his head and grinned, which pulled at the cut and made him hiss in pain. Even though I couldn't hear it, I could imagine the sound. Eric didn't just disappear. Over the next few days, all sorts of things started showing up at the shop's door. Expensive supplements, imported fruits, and that deep blue velvet ring box. Sometimes they were delivered by a courier, sometimes by his assistant. Cole never told me about them. He disposed of everything like used motor oil, tossing it all into the trash can at the corner of the street. Except for the ring. One time, I saw him sitting on the steps outside, holding the ring and staring into space. The setting sun cast a glow on his face, making the scar on his brow look a little fierce. When he saw me, he quickly shoved the ring in his pocket and stood up, patting the dust off his pants. He wrote, "This thing is valuable. It'd be a waste to throw it out. I'll sell it later and get you a good hearing aid." I looked at him and shook my head. I took the pen and wrote on the paper, "Don't bother. Sell it and buy yourself some new equipment. That car lift is ancient." Cole froze for a second, then clenched his fist, crumpling my note tightly in his hand. It was also during those days that I noticed something was wrong with my eyes. At first, it was just double vision, like an old TV with a snowy screen. Then, the edges of my vision started to darken, as if someone were slowly drawing a curtain. One day, I was in the kitchen cutting vegetables while Cole was downstairs working on a car. I stared at the potato on the cutting board, but I couldn't focus on it. The knife came down, missed, and sliced my finger. Blood welled up, but I didn't feel any pain. I just watched the red smear across the yellow potato, thinking the color looked a bit dim. Cole came up to get some water and saw the blood on my hand. He dropped his cup. He rushed over, held my hand under running water, and put on a bandage. His hands were shaking the whole time. After he finished, Cole held my face and made me look at him. He wrote on the whiteboard in big, heavy letters, "What's happening? Is your vision getting blurry?" I looked at the black letters, which seemed to shrink and grow in my field of vision. I didn't want to admit it, but my tears were more honest than I was. I nodded. Cole froze, like a statue that had been weathered by the wind for years. After a long time, he threw down the pen and pulled me into his arms. This time, he held me gently, as if he were afraid I might break. He traced letters on my back, his fingertips moving through the fabric over my spine. "It's okay. I'll be your eyes. I'll take you wherever you want to go." Our trip to the seaside came earlier than planned. Cole seemed to sense that my time was running out. The very next day, he closed the shop, and we set off on his heavy-duty motorcycle. The wind was fierce that day. He wrapped me in 2 down jackets and made me wear knee pads and a scarf, bundling me up like a burrito. I sat on the back, my arms wrapped around his waist, my face pressed against his broad back. Although I couldn't hear the wind, I could feel it whipping past my helmet like a knife, and I could feel the powerful vibrations of the engine beneath me. The vibrations traveled up my legs and deep into my heart. It made me feel alive. We reached the coast in the evening. The winter beach was deserted, with only a few shivering gulls on the sand. The sunset painted the sea a golden red, the glittering waves so bright they hurt my eyes a little. But I watched greedily. I knew I wouldn't get to see a view like this many more times. Cole parked the motorcycle and took a huge Bluetooth speaker out of his bag. He placed it on a rock, connected his phone, and cranked the volume to the max. Then he came over, took my hand, and pressed it against the speaker's black vibrating diaphragm. In that instant, a strong, rhythmic vibration shot through my fingertips and my entire body. It was a rock song. I couldn't hear the melody, but I could feel the thumping of the drums, the roar of the bass. The vibrations felt alive, dancing in my blood. I moved with the rhythm and laughed until my sides hurt. Watching me laugh, Cole laughed too. His face, which was usually so stern, softened into a tenderness I had never seen before. The wind messed up his hair, making him look like a 17 or 18-year-old boy. As he was laughing, he suddenly leaned in close. Cole's face was bathed in the golden light of the sunset. His eyelashes were long, and his eyes reflected the sea and me. He lowered his head and gave me a light kiss on the lips. It was so gentle, like a wisp of sea foam, a little salty, a little cool, and endlessly tender. I was stunned. He got flustered and started to pull back, probably trying to explain with some gesture. But I reached up, wrapped my arms around his neck, pulled him back toward me, and deepened the kiss. His lips were a little chapped and tasted of tobacco. Felt so real. In that moment, I suddenly felt that even if the world was silent, it didn't matter, because I had Cole. He was my ears, my voice, my only vibration in this dead silent world. After we came back from the coast, my condition worsened much faster than expected. The black curtain fell more and more quickly, and in less than a week my world was reduced to blurry shapes and shadows. I could no longer see Cole's face, only a vague outline. Life became difficult. I would bump into table corners when walking around the house, spill water on my hands when pouring a glass, and even struggle to find my way to the bathroom. My knees were covered in bruises, and my hands had several burns. But I didn't dare tell Cole how I got these injuries. I was afraid of making him sad. But Cole found out anyway. One night he came home very late. I was upstairs, fumbling in the dark, trying to pour him a glass of water when I knocked over the thermos. Scalding water spilled everywhere, and I felt the vibration of the glass liner shattering through the soles of my feet. I was too scared to move, a searing pain shooting through my ankle. Cole rushed upstairs, bringing a gust of wind with him. He wasn't wearing shoes. He ran barefoot over the broken glass, swept me up in his arms, and placed me on the bed. He tended to my burn. I couldn't see clearly, but I could feel that he was crying. After that night, the auto shop changed. All the table corners were padded with thick foam. The clutter on the floor was cleared away and replaced with non-slip mats. He installed a row of handrails on the wall, extending from the top of the stairs to the bed, and then to the bathroom. The handrails were wrapped in coarse rope, which felt rough but provided a good grip. He held my hand and walked me through the routes over and over. This is the bathroom. This is the table. This is the closet. He wrote in my palm, patiently teaching me to memorize the layout. He even found a white cane from somewhere, but he never let me use it because he had practically become my cane. Whenever he was home, no matter where I was, I could reach out and touch him. Sometimes it was a firm arm, sometimes it was his prickly short hair, sometimes it was his warm back. He stopped taking on new clients and only accepted jobs from regulars, spending most of his time watching over me. I had become his full-time job. In mid-December, the first snow fell in the city. That day, I went completely blind. When I woke up that morning, I instinctively turned toward the window, but all I saw was darkness. I had become one with the night. I lay in bed, my fingers clutching the sheets. I didn't cry. I just felt an emptiness inside. When Cole came in, he brought a gust of cold air with him. He walked to the bedside and took my hand. His hand was cold and he flinched when he touched me, as if afraid of chilling me. He quickly wrapped my hand in both of his, warming it with his breath. He wrote in my palm, "It's snowing." I nodded and mouthed silently, "I want to touch the snow." Cole went out. A moment later, he came back with a metal basin. He took my hand and guided it into the basin. A cold, soft texture. It was snow. I grabbed a handful. It melted into water in my palm, trickling through my fingers. Just then, a huge commotion erupted downstairs. Even though I couldn't hear, I felt the floor tremble violently, as if the roll-up door had been forced open. Cole's hand tightened around mine, and he moved to shield me. Someone rushed up the stairs. The chaotic vibrations of their footsteps were mixed with a kind of hysterical energy. Someone grabbed my arm. Their grip was strong, almost rough. The hand was trembling, the fingers long but icy cold. It carried a scent of cologne I didn't like, mixed with the heavy smell of alcohol. It was Eric. I couldn't see him, couldn't hear him, but I could smell the desperate, decaying scent on him. He shoved something into my hand. It was hard, a notebook. He grabbed my hand and made me feel the notebook. My fingers brushed against raised dots. Braille. He wanted me to read Braille? How ridiculous. I had just gone blind. How could I possibly know Braille? Eric wrote on the back of my hand. His nails were sharp, scratching me. Come with me. I have money. I learned sign language and Braille. Henry, it's me, Eric. He wrote frantically, messily. I tried to pull my hand away, but because I couldn't see, I slammed the back of my hand against the sharp corner of the nightstand. It hurt, but I didn't care. I fumbled for the metal basin of snow and threw it hard in the direction of the cologne smell. There was a loud clang. Someone grunted. Then came the chaotic vibrations of a scuffle. Cole must have started fighting him. I curled up, in the corner of the bed, hugging my knees, feeling like a useless wreck as two men fought over me. After what felt like an eternity, the vibrations stopped. Someone walked over, carrying the familiar scent of motor oil and blood. He held me very tightly. He wrote in my palm, he's gone. Don't be afraid. I touched his face. It was wet. I couldn't tell if it was sweat, blood, or tears. Eric didn't show up again after that. Cole later wrote in my palm that Eric's leg had been broken that day, and he had to be carried out by his bodyguards. The days passed slowly, yet quickly. My body grew weaker. I wasn't just deaf and blind. I had lost my sense of balance completely. I started spending all my time in bed, my periods of lucidity growing shorter. On the winter solstice, Cole made dumplings, chive and egg filling. I don't like meat. He let them cool before feeding them to me. I chewed on the dumplings, but I couldn't taste much of anything. My sense of taste was fading too. After we ate, he carried me to the lounge chair by the window and covered me with a thick blanket. He held my hand and kept writing on it, but my senses were dulling. The feeling in my fingertips was like I was wearing thick gloves. I could no longer tell what he was writing. Probably silly things like, I love you. I loved him too. Even though it was late, even though it was only for these short 2 months. But these 60 days were more alive, more real, than the 7 years I spent with Eric. I wanted to tell him not to be sad. I wanted to tell him to find someone good, not another dying person like me. But I didn't have the strength. I tried to lift my hand, to touch his face. He caught my hand and pressed it against his cheek. It was stubbly and wet. He was crying. That fool. I died on a morning in January. It must have been a sunny day, because I felt a warm light on my eyelids. My body felt light, as if I were floating on a cloud. The pain was gone, and the constant ringing in my ears had vanished. I could hear sounds again. Not real sounds, but echoes from my memory. I heard the deep, mellow melody of a cello, the thud of a basketball on the high school court, the bell of Cole's bicycle as he rode past me. Ding-a-ling, it was the sound of being 17. I tried to open my eyes. Though my vision was still a void of blackness, I felt like I could see that boy. He was in his school uniform, sweating, holding a bottle of cold soda, standing nervously in front of me. Henry, this is for you. I wanted to smile, but the corners of my mouth were too heavy to lift. Breathing became difficult, like a stone was pressing on my chest. I felt Cole's grip on my hand tighten, so tight it almost hurt. He was shaking violently. Something landed on my lips, warm, trembling, and full of endless despair. It was Cole's kiss, and it was the last sensation this world would leave me with. I wanted to squeeze his hand back, to tell him not to be afraid. But my hand no longer obeyed me. It slowly slipped from his grasp. So be it. Goodbye, Cole. In the next life, make sure you ride up and get me sooner. Don't let me wait for the wrong person again. The moment Henry's hand fell, I felt like a piece of my heart had been ripped out. The room was terrifyingly quiet. No breathing, no heartbeat. Only the occasional car horn from outside. I stayed kneeling by the bed, holding his hand, not daring to move. I was afraid that if I moved, I would have to admit he was gone. His hand was still warm, his face still soft. He just wasn't responding to me anymore. I didn't cry. I had already run out of tears. I got up, fetched a basin of warm water and a towel, and gently washed his face, his hands, his body. He loved being clean. He should be clean when he left. I dressed him in his favorite pale yellow jacket. It was the one I had saved up to buy him during his first month here. I couldn't afford expensive rings. Even a nice jacket like that took me a long time to save for. It's a shame he couldn't see the color by then. He could only touch the fabric and say how soft it was. I combed his hair and put on the diamond ring I had secretly bought but never had the courage to give him. The diamond wasn't big or flashy, but Henry made everything look beautiful. After I finished, I held him and sat in the lounge chair by the window. We sat there until it got dark. The body in my arms slowly grew cold, stiff. That's when it finally hit me. My Henry was really gone. The funeral was simple. Henry didn't have any family, and he had lost contact with his friends under Eric's control. Not many people came, just a few neighbors. Eric came. He burst into the funeral home like a madman, unshaven, his eyes sunken, wearing that same wrinkled dark blue suit. He threw himself at the coffin, trying to pry it open, shouting, "Henry isn't dead. I don't believe it." I didn't stop him. I just stood to the side, watching him lose his mind. The moment his hand touched the coffin, I grabbed the whiteboard from the table and smashed it across his face. It had the last few things Henry had written. The plastic corner was sharp. It cut his forehead, and blood streamed down, blurring his vision. He froze, then shakily picked up the board. It was covered with my name. Cole. Cole, it doesn't hurt. Cole, I want some of those roasted chestnuts from downtown. Cole, if there's a next life, I want to meet you first. The writing was shaky and crooked because he had written it after he went blind. There was no mention of Eric. Not even a single word. Eric stared at the words, his whole body collapsing as if his spine had been removed. He clutched the whiteboard and let out a guttural, wounded animal sound. The crying was ugly, desperate. Why isn't my name here, Henry? I looked at him and felt both pity and satisfaction. Because you don't deserve it. My voice was hoarse, like I had swallowed sand. You had his best 7 years, and you threw him away. I only had his last 2 months, but I had all of his love. Eric looked up at me, his face a mess of blood and tears. I kicked him in the shoulder, knocking him to the ground. Get out. Don't dirty his path. I didn't let Eric come to the cremation. I took Henry's ashes, got on the motorcycle he had ridden, and drove south. It was his last wish. He said he wanted to see the ocean, that he hadn't seen enough. He said he wanted to hear the sound of the waves. I was taking him there. I sold the auto shop and bought a small cabin by the sea, where I opened a tiny repair shop. The ocean was right behind it. I placed his urn on the windowsill facing the sea, next to his broken cello and the Bluetooth speaker. Every evening I sit by the water. I learned to play the cello. My fingers are clumsy and calloused, and it sounds awful when I play, like sawing wood. But I play every day. I play Carmen and that rock song he liked. I know he can hear me. When the sea breeze blows, that's him, touching my face. Sometimes, I feel like he's sitting right next to me, smiling as he watches me fumble with the strings. The days go by. Eric has come a few times. He's completely fallen apart. He doesn't care about his company anymore and just drinks all day. He wants to see Henry, even just the urn. I never let him in. He sat outside my door for a whole night, listening to me play the cello until dawn, and then he left. Before he left, I gave him the photo album and that family picture. Only Henry was no longer in them. I heard later that he went crazy. He spends his days talking to thin air and sending people to buy roasted chestnuts. He deserves it. Another winter has come. It's snowing by the sea. I'm sitting on a rock holding that whiteboard. The writing has faded a little, but I trace it every day. Cole, if there's a next life, I want to meet you first. I look at the words, and my eyes burn. Henry, you never knew. In this life, I was the one who met you first, too. I was just too much of a coward. I only dared to watch you from the corner, to hand you medicine when you were hurt, to quietly follow behind you as you walked away with someone else. If I had been a little braver back then, if on that day after school, when I handed you that soda, I had said just one more thing, would things have turned out differently? But there are no what-ifs. I lower my head and kiss the words. The sea breeze whips up the snowflakes, and they land on my shoulder. Feels like you patting my shoulder. Henry, I love you too. Not just for 2 months. For my whole life. I'll always be here, watching over this sea, watching over you, until I turn to ash myself, and we can be together, never to be separated again. Epilogue. The soda that summer, the summer of my sophomore year, the cicadas were deafening. I would hide in the shadows of my auto shop, my hands covered in grease, and watch the window of the building across the street. That was when Henry practiced his cello. Even from across the street, I could faintly hear the sound of the cello, deep, elegant, and completely out of place on this rundown street. He would sit by the window in a white shirt, looking like an angel. I was a rat in the gutter, but I loved watching angels. One day after school, it started pouring. He didn't have an umbrella and was shivering under the eaves of the school gate. Eric hadn't come to pick him up yet. I circled on my beat-up bike 3 times in the rain, and finally worked up the courage to stop in front of him. I took off my school jacket, wanting to give it to him, but then I worried the smell of motor oil would bother him. In the end, I just shoved my umbrella into his hands. Here. My voice was trembling, more chaotic than the rain. He froze for a second, then took the umbrella and smiled at me. Thanks, Cole. He remembered my name. In that moment, I felt like I could die happy right there in the rain. I wanted to say, I'll take you home, or I like you. But the words that came out were, you don't have to give it back. Then I got on my bike and fled. I pedaled furiously through the rain, my heart about to pound out of my chest. Back then, I thought we had all the time in the world. I thought if I just worked hard, fixed cars, and made money, one day I would be worthy of him. I could stand by his side. But I never imagined that would be the closest we would ever get. Later, he got with Eric. He went to a university I couldn't afford and moved into a villa I couldn't enter. All I could do was stay in my shop, polishing parts over and over, letting the calluses on my hands grow thicker. Until that rainy night 7 years later. He appeared before me again, even though it was 7 years too late. But at least this time I didn't run.